Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Before starting to dive into our presentation, I will let Paul talk about our giants, our female presentation slide.
Thanks, Olivier. We'll keep this one quick because we only have a 15-minute presentation, but we thought we'd put one in anyway. So this is Dana Lewis, who did a lot of work automating insulin delivery systems, but in the open source world. So started as a project of her own, automating her own continuous glucose monitors for alarms, and has ended up being fundamental to the development of the open APS movement, the open artificial pancreas movement. A great person for talk about open source projects, because if you can open source things like medical devices, then you're doing well. But also close to me, because as a type 1 diabetic myself, I use an open APS system to keep me alive. So that's cool. So I'll hand back on that note to Olivier.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for this inspiring story about open source. Before diving into our story of how to contribute to an open source project, we would like to talk a bit about open source project, and probably what it means for most of us is that when you hear open source project, you hear an application or a tool free to use, where the source code is available, and the application is developed by many contributors. On this last point, in our LabVIEW world, it's probably not so true. I didn't see lots of contributions on the open source project I aware of. So what is a usual LabVIEW open source project in our world is one developer, the maintainer of the project, and who is going to do almost 100% of the work. So what if a LabVIEW developer wants to contribute to a project? He will be able to access the source code hosted on GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, that kind of services. And at the end, he will need to share his code modification with the developer. So how we are going to make it a successful contribution? That's the story we want to share with you. I am the maintainer of the project ASCII-Doc Toolkit for LabVIEW. Basically, it's an API that allows you to create plain text files using the ASCII-Doc syntax. And with the right toolchain, you can transform these files into PDF or HTML file. And this is on this project, Paul contributes. So tell us our story, Paul.
Thanks, Olivier. Yes, so in this story, I'm the contributor. So first question is why did we want to use ASCII-Doc in the first place? So a lot of our applications end up using some form of, or generating some kind of measurement report output. Historically, we've used various PDF authoring toolkits for that, but they can be a little bit inflexible in as much as you're almost creating the document in code. And if you want to change the layout, you've got to go and change the code. ASCII-Doc appealed because essentially you're building a plain text file for your report, and then later on doing the publishing part through a separate toolchain, so you have more options later. What it couldn't do when we first started evaluating it, though, was any kind of nested table. So the table in the image in the slide is an example of something we might create. It's a made-up one, but that image is real, by the way, where we actually have a table of results within a larger table. And ASCII-Doc, as it stood, couldn't do that, or at least the LabVIEW toolkit couldn't do that. But ASCII-Doc, the external tool, did have that capability. It just wasn't implemented in Olivier's toolkit. So that's what we wanted to be able to do, and that's where the story kind of started. So having never worked on an open source project before, this was all very new to me. But the first thing that I did, I think, was really to make contact with Olivier. I'd never worked with Olivier before. I'd heard his name in a few places, so I asked a few questions and we got in touch. And I explained to him ultimately what I was hoping to be able to achieve, and that I wanted to see if we could add this capability to the system. So then we had to go through a fairly simple process ultimately. And this table kind of summarizes things. So we start by creating an issue in the open source platform that Olivier was using, which was GitLab. We created an issue within the repository describing what it was we wanted to try and add or address with the toolkit. We talked about it a lot. So on the right-hand side of this table and throughout all of the process was some of the communication that we had through GitLab mostly, so we could record decisions and ideas. Once we'd agreed to go ahead and I was going to do some work on this, fork the repository. Another new experience for me. I had no idea what forking a repository meant. We do use Git for all of our work, but I've never actually forked before, so that was new. It's basically just like cloning, only different. You clone to almost cloning to a separate repository that's linked from the unlinked from the remote. After that, the simple task of doing the work, putting the time in and actually working things through, all the while still in good, constant almost communication with Olivier, making sure that the ideas that I'd had and how I wanted to implement it tied in with what he was hoping to achieve as well through his own toolkit. And then at the end of the process, it's really about requesting to merge. So once we'd agreed that we'd completed the work that we wanted to do for this version, through the source control, again through GitLab, it was a request to merge, which is very much like a pull request or a merge request in different platforms. And then really at that point, it's hands back over to Olivier.
Yes, and the latest steps I had to do were very straightforward because, as you said, Paul, we had a lot of discussions during the design and the development steps. So I just received a notification by email that you made the pull request. I checked out your branch in my project repository, quickly checked the modifications, and then merge into the official project. So at the end, we created a new release of the toolkit. This release added the advanced way to create tables in ASCII doc files. So it was really interesting to add this feature to the tool. So what we learned during this collaboration, Paul, I'm letting you speak about the lessons learned during this.
Thanks, Olivier. So I think from the contributor's point of view, and certainly from mine during all this, having not done this before, is I think it must be a win-win. And I'm saying that as one side of that story, but I think it must be. I get functionality that's added to a toolkit, which I had to write the added functionality, but I didn't have to write the entire toolkit, right? So I've only had to do a small bit of work to get a big output. I get a deeper understanding of that toolkit. So I've had to work inside it. I've had to actually manipulate the code, make changes. And I think sometimes with toolkits, we often just fall into the trap a little bit of just using them because we're there to save time. That's what the toolkit's for. But there is benefit to actually having a deeper understanding of how that toolkit works. And this was a good way of prompting that to happen. Personally, for me, validation, it's nice to share your code with someone else who's experienced and actually have to prepare the code in a way that they're going to like. So having someone else to look at your own code and make sure that, and feedback that you are actually doing things not too badly is always nice. Again, on the personal notes, it's like getting to meet and work with someone new. I said earlier on, we've not met before this project. We have now met at GDevCon, which was cool. And it was really nice to actually have an opportunity to meet and work with someone new. And with a lot of things, it's always nice to contribute to something that's bigger than you, right? So I don't get to contribute to code that gets used by a lot of other people very often. I'm working in a small team doing internal projects. So to contribute to a toolkit that actually the wider community can benefit from as well, hopefully is also quite a nice feeling. So I think for me, there's a lot of positives here. Yes, I had to put some time into doing some coding, but actually I quite enjoyed doing that too.
Okay, thank you, Paul, for this feedback. On my side, it was also a win-win experience. I have to say that it was the first contribution that worked the way I ever dreamed of when I started to work on open source projects. You added a feature I would probably never add it to the tool because I didn't have the use case. So we improve the tool. You improve the tool by your contribution. So I can expect more users to use the toolkit, and it's still something interesting when you start an open source project. For me, it was also a chance to have a code review, and I'm always grateful for every code review because it helps me to get better. And we had great discussion on the code. And at the end, like you, it was the opportunity to meet someone new. And 1 year ago, we didn't know each other, and now we are presenting this talk together, and it's just awesome. As a final note on this presentation, we would like to give some advice for maintainer and contributor to open source projects, because we want open source projects to be successful, and probably maintainer and contributors need to know some rules, I would say, about how to contribute to open source project. On the maintainer side, I have 3 key points. First, you need to set contribution guidelines, because when a developer comes in your project, he needs to know what you are expecting from him before merging code into your project. It's not that easy to have guidelines, so shameless plug, you probably know that the DQMH Consortium recently released style guide for LabVIEW development. It's an open source project. You can use this style guide into your projects, modify them as you want, but it's a good start point. Second point, you need to give the opportunity to contributors to reach out to you, so you can start discussion as soon as you can when an idea comes to improve your tool. So you need to use the GitLab issues or GitHub issues. You can use Slack, Zulip, Discord, chat tools. But yeah, you need to discuss to prevent issues when you are merging code. And keep in mind that contributors need to keep changes in small area to make the merge easier at the end. So that's my 3 key points. And you, Paul?
Yeah, I think there's some similar points, really. I mean, read and understand the guidelines. I smile when I say that, mostly because there weren't any when I started the project with Olivier. He has put that right since, but we did a lot of talking about it. So I think we didn't, maybe some of the extra communication that we did might have been unnecessary, perhaps, if there were guidelines, but it's never hurts to talk. But yeah, if there are guidelines there, it's your job to read them and make sure you know what you're doing. I think there's a common theme to all of my my advice, really. So communication with the maintainer, talk to them about your idea, explain to them what you're trying to do, listen to their feedback, work together ultimately to come up with the better thing. I think you have to remember to be humble. Your idea, brilliant as it may be, and it will be brilliant, it might still not fit with the maintainer's goals or visions for the project. You can challenge that. You can try and explain why it is a great fit, but ultimately it's their decision, it's their project. If you really fall out over it, just fork the project to make your own version. But you have to be humble in that, and I think listening is also it's related. Be guided by the maintainer, not only in terms of does your idea fit the way you're trying to implement it, does it actually all tie in nicely. I think from a personal point of view, it was nice for Olivier to actually be reining me in a little, because it is easy sometimes to get carried away and just start thinking, oh, well, I'm changing this bit. I could just do, oh, this would be awesome. However, don't. Listen to that idea of keeping it to a small change. I think that's really important. And I'm going to steal the last line, which is really a maintainer's thing, but I think it covers both sides. Ultimately, the maintainer has the right to decline the contribution idea if it doesn't fit, because it's his project, right? He has the right to do that. He also has, and I think that's important advice for both the contributor and the maintainer. If, as the maintainer, you don't like what someone's suggesting, you can still say no and tell them to go away, politely. And the same at the merge request point. If it doesn't actually fit, again, don't be surprised if someone rejects your submission and your merge request on the basis that you haven't done what you'd agreed to do or what was set out in the guidelines. And again, from the maintainer's point of view, you have that right. It is your project. But ultimately, I think if you follow the ideas of communication and working together, it's a teamwork thing, then I don't think you'll ever get to that point.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone, for attending. If you have questions, I saw questions in the chat, so we will try to reply them. And you can reach out to us via the chat if you want to discuss more about that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Olivier. Thanks.